Hello! Welcome to the Christchurch Fox Chapel podcast. The fastest growing conservative, evangelical, charismatic, scaffolding podcast in the entire Fox Chapel area. The joys of an old building, right?
Yeah, there's scaffolding outside. And we may hear, this podcast might be interrupted by various knocking noises and buzz saws and such.
Like a third of the podcast that we've ever done.
Yeah. Well, it's like mid-afternoon. Mm-hmm. We were going to record earlier, but there was a flock of children. Mm. Is that what you call it? A flock?
What's the collective noun? Yeah. I don't know. A murder.
A murder of children. They murder the audio quality of your podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, this place is happening. I feel like there's always something going on during the week.
What's amazing is these people have made it no longer rain inside the sanctuary. We think we've actually fixed the leak at last.
Because we were just talking about this morning that there were 2 torrents this spring, and we all just realized, oh wait, there's no
liturgical bucket.
There's no liturgical bucket on the left side of the sanctuary.
The Devlin shower is no more.
Yeah, it is. It's gone.
Yeah, there was a member of the church, for those that don't know him, who would frequently get drenched whenever it rained because he insisted on sitting in the same pew, and it was where the leaks were.
Well, that's good, because if we're gonna renovate that space, then
it would be quite nice.
It'd be great for it to not flood after we do that,
wouldn't it? Just
it'd be kind of a bummer to like put a bunch of money into something and then it just gets rotted out.
Yeah, unless we actually installed a permanent bucket, which was a thought.
Oh yeah,
baptistry maybe.
Bring forth the holy bucket.
Moses. So chapter 10, right, is not our chapter. Chapter 10 is the bit where there are things you can do to build faith or hope. And that's things like draw near to God. That's important. Draw near to other believers. And you see that in verses 24, 25. Yep. And tell some stories. Remember the time when.
Book of Hebrews.
Well, there is that. Yes, sorry, I should just mention the Book of Hebrews. For those of you joining the podcast the first time. And, tell some stories about what God has done in your life.
Yeah.
Remember the time, usually a bad time, when God showed up. And then chapter 11 moves on. Jenna preached really well. And really, we're no longer telling necessarily our own personal stories, but we're telling this story now of the heroes of the faith, digging back through the big story of God's people.
Yeah.
Right the way, almost from the beginning. And look at all these characters that we know about from the Old Testament who actually have demonstrated faith in some way.
Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Abraham's wife, Isaac, all these, Jacob, all these kind of, but the thing we noted, I think last week, was just that a lot of these guys are pretty smarmy characters. Like Jacob is a very smarmy character. Abraham basically offers up his wife to any kind of abuse and denies her twice. Noah,
brief scenes of nudity and some of the milder swear words. Certificate 15, I think.
Yeah, Noah's like something NC-17 happens.
Oh, you didn't have Certificate 15 here, did you?
No, I have no idea what you were saying.
Oh, it was a movie rating.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You have to be 15?
Yeah, we had 12 and we had 15 as well as 18.
Oh, we just have PG-13, and then R, you have to be over 17. Oh, I have a great story. Okay. Jenna and I, when we'd been married about a year, so I was 24, 25. We went, and there was some comedy that we were going to see, but and at the movies, we had a rare, like, we were going on a date, and it was rated R, and so we were like, I don't know, but we decided to go and see this thing. So we go in, and Jenna had forgotten her ID, and they would not let us into the movie because they did not believe that we were both over the age of 17.
And how old were you?
We're 25.
That's awful.
I think they must have thought that I was some kind of creepy guy because I had proof that I was 25.
So they allowed you, and they're like, oh.
And I'm like, look, that's literally the wedding ring that I bought for her. Like,
this is my wife.
This is my wife, man. But the guy still wouldn't let us in. He thought we were like a couple of kids who were trying to con their way into an R-rated movie. So we just went. It's probably for the best, right? Like,
what was the movie?
Something with Melissa McCarthy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't even remember, but it's probably for the best that we didn't see it.
I saw Pulp Fiction underage.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was a good movie.
Yeah, that's a classic. Never seen Pulp Fiction.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, I know I need to catch up on my Quentin Tarantino, but
many of his movies are good.
Yeah, I think I'm unlikely to get Jenna convinced to watch that one with me, though. We'll see.
Acquired taste. So all of these characters had these kind of R-rated lives quite often.
Good tie.
Yeah, thank you. And so they're remembered here as heroes of the faith, but of course in reality their lives were very much a mixed bag.
Well, are they remembered as, like, if we take away all of the of the titles and stuff, is there anything in Hebrews that calls them heroes of the faith?
No.
No,
there's not.
So, really what's commended is not these people, but faith.
Yes, the faith they had.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So there's a few features, I think, that we find in this list of characters about their faith. And that's often, really, they found themselves in some kind of a fix. So it's not always that they were just amazingly heroic people.
Yeah.
But often they were in a bind of some kind, and they were basically forced to trust in God because the alternatives were even worse.
Oh, yeah.
So actually, these are just people who went through bad times. That's one way of looking at them. There are other ways of looking at them.
Well, we were talking about this earlier, and you said I should share this on the podcast.
I did.
That, like, Jenna and I didn't, when we first got married, we did not pray together. It just felt too awkward and weird. And then we took on this, like, church plant that ultimately died and left me unemployed. It was a really, really difficult experience, extremely painful, but we learned to pray through that because we had no choice. We had no recourse or options. We needed for there to be a God, and B, for that God to act. And so we prayed, and we learned to pray together. And it's not awkward to pray with Jenna anymore.
Right. And so you would say, okay, obviously you learned then that God is good and God shows up. And that God takes an interest in your life actively right now. But it's also shaped who you are.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, one of the reasons you preach like you preach, and you're the colleague you are, and we do this and all the other things, is because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, all the fruit, all the things that I would say that are fruitful in my life have come out of just our being forced into dependence on God.
Yeah. I remember like moving to seminary, and, up to that point I'd had a job and it was great. And then month one, I realized there were no more salaries coming in. and I wasn't surprised by it, but it was the reality of it actually hit.
Yeah.
And I remember we got a gas bill. It was a final gas bill from a different house. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, that's not in the budget.
Yeah.
Like an extra gas bill, that's not in there. And I sat on the bed and I looked at this bill, and I remember just wanting to cry and thinking, what have I done? What have I done? I've put everybody in this place of total stupid vulnerability here.
Uh-huh.
And then that week, we got a rebate from an old water bill from like 5 years earlier. I'd overpaid somehow, and they tracked me down through several addresses and sent me a check that was bigger than the gas bill. And that started this new life of having to trust in God that, quite frankly, as a lawyer, I'd not had to do, not at least financially. So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And you think you see this with these people, right? So we can go through them and we can see often that they were in a fix. Some have more detail than others. And, Moses, actually, it's not a story about Moses. It's a story about his parents because he's about like a few days old. But Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw the child as beautiful. They were not afraid of the king's edict. The
king's edict was to kill all the newborn boys.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, I think for Pharaoh, the minority Hebrew underclass are a threat to his empire.
Oh, that's so interesting. What an interesting. Okay, this is both an argument for infant baptism, maybe, and also
I didn't see that
because it's by faith Moses was hidden away. Whose faith is it? It's his parents' faith.
His parents' faith.
That's interesting. Not the point of what we're getting at here, but just an interesting note.
Just to put on the side for one of those long discussions. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting. So the fact is that it says here that they were not afraid of the king's edict, and I wonder, why. Well, I mean, it was objectively a terrifying thing. So I guess what it means is they thought, well, we might as well risk shoving him in a basket covered in toxic chemicals in amongst all the lizards, and whatever. He's going to get his head chopped off anyway, so we might as well.
Yeah.
The circumstances, if you like, were so horrific that they had no choice but to take a crazy risk.
Uh-huh. There's an interesting parallel that the basket that Moses is put in with the pitch, the tar, is the same Hebrew word, ark, as you get in Genesis.
No way.
6 for Noah. Yeah.
Same word.
Yeah, same Hebrew word. I forget what word it is, but
a mini ark.
Yeah, it's an ark. He's being delivered through the waters in the ark again. So the judgment comes.
It's all just a little bit of history repeating. Excellent. Yeah, cool.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, yeah.
That was Shirley Bassey, in case anyone wondered what my...
We played that on the podcast before, haven't we?
Yeah, we did, but it wasn't me singing it. I hope it was Jordan Peterson does a good version of this. Hello. Yeah, I reckon that this is actually a story about his parents being forced, in a sense, to take a risk.
Yeah.
And that why are they not afraid of the king's edict? Well, partly because they trust in God.
Yeah.
But, partly what it's saying here is that they're in a fearful situation, and so they're obliged to take crazy risks. Mm-hmm. And when things go wrong, often we are, right? So you could say this with your health.
Yeah.
That people will often say the times that they prayed the most sincerely was when their bodies let them down.
Yeah.
Right, a crisis comes.
Whatever it is that you trust in, if it fails you, then you, God is there. You have to pray to God, and then you're forced suddenly into a real relationship, a real trust in Him.
So they're in a corner, right? But Moses himself isn't. This is intriguing. So when you get to Moses himself, right, he is not, forced by the point of a sword to take a leap of faith. He seems a lot more calculating. So in verse 24, by faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. So he's been taken into Pharaoh's household of all people. It's Pharaoh's daughter that finds him in the basket and adopts him. Choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. So he makes a choice. It says so, verse 25.
He chooses the way of the cross. He chooses to be associated with God and what God is doing in the world, and to leave behind the pleasures and privileges of his affluent upbringing.
Yeah,
That's a message for Fox Chapel kids.
Certainly is. And it says take for oneself or prefer. That's the Hebrew word.
Huh.
So that's also fascinating. This is a personal choice he makes, unlike his parents who were almost obliged.
Yeah.
He's looking now at his own people, almost in disguise, right? Because everyone sees him as just a royal household person. But he's looking at the Hebrews. He knows he's from them. He sees them being mistreated as slaves. And he compares the fleeting pleasures of Egypt, which are material blessings and power and whatever.
Yeah.
To whatever it is that he sees them having forever. the wealth and treasures of Egypt, and he was looking for a reward.
Verse 26, right?
Yeah.
He considered the reproach of Christ. That's interesting. The reproach of Christ.
Christ is mentioned here, as if Moses is thinking about Christ.
Greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward.
Yes.
That's the way of the cross.
Yes.
And the reproach of Christ is the cross. So Hebrews identifies that Moses took up his cross.
So I think he's doing the long game here. Now this is intriguing because in Exodus we don't get any of this, right? In Exodus it's just a pretty short account. Moses sees this taskmaster who is abusing a Hebrew slave, steps in without anyone asking him to, beats the fella up and kills him. And it's sort of left with almost without comment. His mates, the Hebrew slaves, sort of almost taunt him a bit for it, and they say, "Look, are you going to kill us next?" And so I have always read that in Exodus. Maybe you've read it differently, but I've always read it as a kind of tantrum. He's a bit angry, or he's just arrogant, and it's a bit of an ego trip, or what. But it's not really explained in Hebrew in Exodus what he was thinking.
That's pretty typical Hebrew narrative. I think you just have the
you have
action.
To infer it.
You have to see what comes of it. But
we do know later on. Don't want to give too much away, but by the way, they escape. That he gets angry with the people and he smacks his stick on a rock, and I think showing off the power of God to kind of teach them all a lesson. So we do know that he has a bit of a temper on him, and so if you stitch those two episodes together, you get the sense of a bit of an angry dude. But here in Hebrews, we're given a very, very different account, right? We're being told, in fact, actually, this was a very calculating thing to choose the way of the cross, because he recognizes that actually the fleeting pleasures of Egypt are nothing compared to the eternal treasure of heaven. And that this is a calculation to let go of his luxury and take up suffering.
So we don't necessarily have to commend murder, but I'm
encouraged that you say so. Yeah.
To say, but we can still say, like, Moses cast his lot. He put in his bit with the Hebrew people.
Right. But what I'm wondering is why the discrepancy or apparent discrepancy in the accounts. Why does Exodus lead us to believe that this is just a silly tantrum, and Hebrews lead us to believe this is in fact a very calculating leap of faith?
Interesting.
And I don't know the answer, right? But I'm suspecting it's something to do with. Well, I suspect it's something to do with Jesus. Well,
there's an underlying
principle.
There's an underlying heart posture that would lead Moses to getting angry at the beating of a Hebrew slave being beaten.
Interesting. Okay.
And so maybe Hebrews is obviously commenting and evaluating and making an overarching point by showing a theme throughout the scriptures.
Right.
So maybe that decision for Moses' life had been cast before that moment came when he killed the Egyptian. And maybe he had this kind of heart posture that was for the people, and he couldn't, and then he saw the one guy getting abused and he just exploded then.
So you're a mixed bag of a person with some really poor episodes in your past.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to the fundamental question of, are you saved or not? He's a faithful person because ultimately he trusted God.
Yeah.
Not because he was good.
His expression of anger was the wrong expression of anger, but his fundamental allegiance that led to that anger was right. Okay, so that's really, really encouraging, because those of us who have made a horrible mistake, who let's say the fix that we're in is not because big nasty Pharaoh's out to get us, but the mess that we're in is because we've done something stupid. And we're the author of our own trap. Which is often the case.
Yeah. There's still encouragement even then. Mm-hmm. Because we're not the ones who are responsible for saving ourselves.
Yeah. And maybe what got us into that trap, however distorted, had an underlying motive that was good.
Right.
Like there could have been something good in there, even tangled up and twisted as it may have been.
All right. So... Rahab, she's intriguing.
This is the next one.
Verse 31.
31.
Right. So this is interesting because Rahab really looks to me as though she's choosing trouble. Right?
Rahab the prostitute.
Yeah.
Step one.
Okay. So, yes, Rahab the prostitute. So you may spot one or two issues with her. Yeah.
Yeah. Did not, by faith, Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, but because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. What's this talking about? So
Joshua is leading the people of God. So they've escaped. Moses has led them out of Egypt through the sea, round in the wilderness. They've reached the edge of the promised land. They've crossed the River Jordan. And the first thing they need to do is to capture the city of Jericho, which is this fortress city.
Yeah. Get the stronghold.
Yes. And Joshua sends spies into the city to kind of just check it out. And the spies end up going to the prostitute's house. I don't think we're meant to necessarily read anything into that. She probably also ran a pub, like in the Wild West, in those old saloons with kind of like floozies up and down the staircase, and
who knows,
3 fingers of sipping whiskey downstairs. I think it's a bit like that, a place to stay that also has women working in it. So,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
But by the way, this is Jesus' granny. But that's also an interesting story.
Yeah.
But Rahab the prostitute has these spies. They come to her place, and then the authorities come round and say, "We've heard that the spies are here. Bring them out." And she has this choice to make at this point.
Yeah, turn them in,
obviously, and save herself.
Yeah, or
hide them.
Hide them. It's who are you betting on? Whose team are you on?
Right, but she's not really in a fix because the risk is just to the spies, not to her. Right. It's not like the Pharaoh thing where Pharaoh was going to come and kill your child. At this point, the authorities are coming around saying, they're here, bring them out, and, we can all move on.
Yeah, but the spies are saying, the idea of the spies is that like there are more of us that are going to come and invade this city. So do you believe that there's going to be an invasion and that you should cast your lot with these spies? Or do you believe that Jericho is
inviolable?
Inviolable, impregnable, and you should turn the spies over? So she has to choose between two different kingdoms, two different orders.
Yes, that's true. But she could hand over the spies and then run away.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
she's not in quite the intractable kind of dilemma that the others have been in. I think. I don't know. I view this as even more voluntary than the thing that Moses just did. Because she could feasibly just run away. Right?
Yeah, I suppose she could have.
She doesn't. Not only does she harbour the spies, but she sends off the search party in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
And then she says to them, look after me. And by the way, God does.
Yeah. She lets him down by a rope from the outside of the city walls.
A red rope.
Which
just seems prostituous.
Actually, some of the church fathers thought that the red rope, read that, and they thought, oh, the red rope clearly signifies the blood of Christ.
Right, but I'm thinking red light.
Oh.
I don't know if that's true.
I don't know if that, I have no idea.
Like Roxanne.
Roxanne.
You don't have to put on a red light. Rahab, you don't have to dangle a red rope. I think, I don't know. I imagined it being something like that, but
who knows? But it's definitely probably not, the color of the rope is not what predicts Christ, but rather this act of faith on the part of a person of ill repute,
right?
Ties her into God's promises to the point that she's in the list of the Hall of Heroes, Hall of Faith.
So you've got these characters who are really, really odd, right? I mean, Moses is this angry murderer, right? And Rahab is a prostitute. And yet, when it comes to the crunch, they do the right thing. In a sense, both of them, they're taking enormous risks with their life, or apparent risks with their life. Mm-hmm. And I'm arguing they didn't even really quite have to.
No.
They chose to.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, you therefore go out and take a risk. It's a good application point.
It seems like this is really, I guess I always thought of Hebrews 11 as like the hall of people who made the right moral decision. And, you would think that you would commend people for not, like, so-and-so told the truth and yada, yada. But actually, Rahab does not tell the truth to these people.
She's a liar.
Lies. So really, the only good thing about the people throughout this chapter are their allegiance. They are they're following what God is doing in the world.
So it's certainly not her background.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not her behavior.
Yeah. No.
That's clear. And you could say with Moses, at least, it's not his behavior, right?
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And then you get to this whole list of characters that we remember from last summer.
Verse 32, and what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah.
I can feel it coming. It's Phil Collins.
These guys are
the Phil Collins of the Old Testament.
Jephthah, the Phil Collins of the Old Testament.
A thug.
He's just a thug. Samson is one of the worst characters in all of the Bible.
You always say this. You
horrible.
always say this. I love it.
He sucks in every way. Even his final heroic death, through which he brings down the Philistines, that is always in every children's Bible commended as this great thing, which in a sense it is, but also it's like this vindictive act. He's just killing all the people who gouged out his eyes and cut off his hair. Like, he is the worst. Gideon, totally spineless, weak,
endlessly testing
weird,
God.
Yeah, endlessly testing God. And then he becomes full of himself after God delivers him, and he tries to take over and create a priesthood of his own.
Oh, he makes an ephod for himself.
Yeah, right. He's a totally sketchy character.
And he's the one that has the son, right? Abimelech, my father is king, isn't he? Isn't he the one? Do you remember we talked about that?
Yeah, he said, like, I'm not a king, and then he has his son Abimelech means my father is the king.
Yeah.
So he named his son, my father is the king.
Yeah. At the same time as saying I'm not a king, and then behaved as a priest.
And then Barak,
which is really, really doubly blasphemous, because the true priest king is Christ.
Yeah.
So he's kind of sitting at the top of this constitutional pyramid, trying to being all sides of it.
He's just becomes just another thug warlord leader.
Right. Barak is pretty weak. Not Obama. Barak is like this mighty warrior, but he has to have his hand held all the time by Deborah.
Yeah, that's interesting, and especially in a society where the women were considered to be weak, and it was disgraceful for a woman to be leading, that Barak didn't just take up the reins and be the leader.
And these are the judges. These are the leaders of Israel before the kings, right? So these are God's appointed leaders of the people.
So what do these guys all have in common? Is that they are tied into God's purpose.
Well, that's one thing. I think the other thing would be that they kind of rubbish. I mean, Jephthah makes this vow. Remember, so God's giving him victory, and he's like, well, I better do some weird holy thing.
I'll sacrifice whoever first comes out of my house.
And it's his daughter who comes out of his house. And so God is giving victories, but he's thinking to himself, unless I kind of put some skin in the game here, then I'm not going to be able to be confident of the victory. So he puts his faith in himself, in his own religious deeds, in his own willingness to kind of stake what he imagines, I'm sure, is a chicken or a goat or something. Whatever comes out of my house first after the battle, I'll sacrifice that to the Lord.
Yeah.
Of course, it's his daughter that comes running out with flowers for him. And he looks like a fool. Mm-hmm. So you've got Gideon, who's weak and endlessly doing deals and tests. You've got Barak, who needs his hand-holding. Samson, who's just this spiteful, boastful guy. Jephthah, who makes the rash vow. And then we get to David, who's the first king on this list. Not a judge, but a king.
Who uses... Yeah.
And he was great.
Except for when he sat in his power and sexually abused a woman and then had her husband murdered.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course.
There's that.
Having perved her up first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like the Harvey Weinstein of the Bible, right?
Wow.
Like,
I'd never seen him that way, but
I mean,
the original Me Too moment.
Yeah, it's a thing. Like he's not a good man. He's a man after the Lord's own heart, and yet he's also not a good man. This is the tension that we have to struggle with as we read the Old Testament, and also as we come to honest terms with ourselves. You can be a person after God's heart and also be not a good person.
So this is really killing off any sense that here's this group of people who are awesome, go and be like them.
Yeah.
Because those sermons are awful.
Don't dare to be a David.
Yeah. These sermons are really discouraging, I think, when you basically look, here's Saint so-and-so the great, and they were wonderful, and they did all these wonderful deeds, and then you go and be like them. And
yeah.
It's very depressing.
It's dark. These are dark narratives.
Okay. So we have a litany here, a kind of catastrophic litany of failed people who are commended for their faith.
Samuel's pretty good.
Yeah. He was pretty good, actually.
That's kind of what
I was thinking.
Honestly, that's one of the reasons why I named my son Sam.
Oh, really? Because you went through this list and you're like, well, he's not so bad. I was like, who's
there in the Old Testament that's pretty good? Yeah, Samuel's pretty good.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe that's actually not a good way to go.
I'm trying to think of any other characters. You don't want the spirit of Ahab.
No, I don't want that. I mean, even, most of them are a mixed bag.
Right. Well, then there's the lesson. And yet through faith, and I think that's important, verse 33, not through innate goodness, not through skill, not through holiness or tactics or, you could insert any kind of vaguely positive sounding word there, but through faith. They conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions. I reckon that's a reference to Daniel. Yeah. Quenched the power of fire, which I think could be a reference to his three friends in the furnace. Escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong out of weakness, became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight, and it goes on.
Yeah.
A lot of success in situations that were apparently hopeless. To be placed in a lion's den, Daniel, or a fiery furnace, Meshach, Shadrach, Abednego, you're in a place of guaranteed destruction.
Yes.
Right, that's the thing.
It's the end.
Within which no scheme of your own could possibly save you from those situations.
Yeah.
And yet, I mean, what's so wonderful, I think, is that those situations force them to have faith. I mean, they really boiled it all down to, do you trust in this God or not?
Yeah. Yeah, and that is ultimately what, I think one thing that's true of all these characters throughout Hebrews 11 is that there's something beautiful about their lives. Because despite their many flaws, their life is captured by the grace and movement of God. Who does something with them and it's such an interesting testimony to who God is, that he's willing to work in the messy, broken scenarios, compromised scenarios of these people to bring about his good purpose. It's remarkable.
I feel that verse 34 is probably one of the operative verses where it says they were made strong out of weakness. I think that's the essence of this.
Yeah.
That the essence of faith is not that you were a strong person.
Yeah.
But that actually you were a weak person. You were vulnerable and maybe trapped.
Yeah, and God used you.
And so you might even say that actually facing opposition or facing risk or facing the end of your life is a really opportune moment.
Yeah.
It's a great opportunity to find faith.
I think we're all, at some point or another in our life, we are met with the decision about who we're going to cast our lot with.
Right. That's the deal, isn't it?
And
which way are you going to go?
And there's a fundamental thing of like, who do you trust in? Who are you following? And there are a lot of people who are followers of Jesus who do that so in a very imperfect way, myself included. But nonetheless, your life is fundamentally shaped by him. Your fundamental trust is in him.
The other interesting feature about them is that this kind of summary sentence down in verse 39, all these, though commended through their faith, did not receive what was promised. So they didn't actually get the thing. Yet. Well, I mean, often they didn't get the kind of the literal thing, but they also didn't get the ultimate thing.
Yeah.
Right, so we've said, haven't we, that often kind of prophetic events or whatever in Scripture, they telescope, right? And they might have an immediate, intermediate, and ultimate fulfillment. Mm-hmm. So, for example, you will go into this promised land and it will be full of grapes. Well, that's a literal, immediate promise that you'll go into this actual safe place and there'll be lots to eat. But it's a much bigger promise behind that you will go into this ultimate presence of God.
Yeah.
Well, you will meet Jesus, and then bigger than that you will be with Jesus forever in a new heaven and a new earth.
So the point is not like that God baits along his people and then never actually fulfills the promise. It's just that this is a story that's continually ongoing. It's like
none of us have seen it ultimately.
Yeah, Sandra McCracken has this great line in an album that she wrote after being left by her husband, where she says, if it's not okay, then it's not the end. And this is not okay. So I know that this is not the end.
Oh, that's good.
I think it's like really, that's really it. Like,
oh, wow, that's really good.
That's such hope. Like, this is not okay. So I know this is not the end. There will come a day when all of these things are vindicated.
So the very presence of trouble is indicative of the fact that we're not finished yet.
Yeah. Still going somewhere.
And what's funny about this, funny is the right word, what's interesting about this is that these people often didn't even see the immediate fulfillment. Like Moses, for example, he didn't get to go into the actual promised land.
Yeah. He got to see it from up on top of a mountain.
Yeah, and then he was done.
But then that was it. Yeah. So many things to be learned, so many takeaways from all of these things.
Yeah.
I think the presence of death and suffering in Hebrews 11 is really kind of a wake-up call to me. Like these are people who their lives in the immediate did not go like they wanted to. It wasn't, few of us would like lay out our 10-year plan to be like, I'm going to suffer right. and give my life for a greater cause. But these people ultimately they had a hope that was kind of seeing beyond what we have here in the world. They weren't satisfied with sort of, I don't know, the empire that was around them.
It just didn't have a shine for them, did it?
No.
And some of them were kind of lowly characters to start off with almost nothing to lose. But others had everything to lose.
And were disillusioned, though.
Disillusioned with it all.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, in the end, they all chose God. And so the thing that's commended there is the faith that he's going to save you, not the faith that you can somehow save yourself. I think that's ultimately what it's all about. We finish with one thought, and that is that we get this word sprinkled, which I think maybe there may be a couple of references to it.
Where's that?
I don't know.
Somewhere
Passover. No, right here and here. There you go. Verse 28, by faith, he kept the Passover, we're back to Moses again, and sprinkled the blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. And then I think there's a hint there about Jesus. That's really the only really explicit one in here, I think.
He chose the way of the cross, and the way of the cross led to this foreshadowing of the atoning work.
Yeah.
In the Passover, the sprinkling of blood.
Yeah, and he kept the Passover before the destroyer passed over.
Yeah.
So, all hell is about to break loose. You're on the cusp of an escape from Egypt. You know that Pharaoh's superpower army is ranged against you and is about to drive you into the sea.
Yeah.
And on that night that you should be getting out of there, God says, have a meal, sit down, and do something really weird with blood. and he does.
He does.
And that's faith. Because there's clearly really nothing he's up to. He's just eating some food and sitting around.
Yeah.
And then the destroyer, this angel of death, passes over and God's people are saved. They're protected, like that ark again, right? From death.
By the blood.
By the blood.
The life of the blood.
Yeah. So I think what we would take from that is, well, we haven't seen Judgment Day.
No.
Right? But we have been offered the blood.
Yeah. And I guess maybe it's a question of allegiance, of what your life is fundamentally about, or what you're fundamentally seeking after, whether it's, money or fame or success and reputation, comfort. Those are all kind of the gods of our culture. Or there's this other thing, there's this other promise that is offered in the gospel that claims to be more satisfying and fulfilling than anything you're going to find in Fox Chapel or anywhere else. It's better than the American dream or what's on offer in a Pottery Barn catalog. So in the face of all of this kind of commercial imagery and all this that we're offered and all the idols of our society, I think Hebrews 11 bids us to kind of focus upon this better promise, like the better thing, and to hold out for it. Like, cast your lot with this. It may not seem like the winning horse, but trust me, it is. And
it may cost you in some way or run you into conflict of various kinds. But the good news is that even in the lowest points in our lives, where we're not really choosing trouble has come to us and there's no escape. Even the moments of no escape are in fact actually the best moments to find faith.
Yeah.
Something like that.
I wonder if the Los Cities agree. They do.
Builders and roofers are climbing up the windows, looking in, pressing their noses against the windows, seeking to join the podcast.
And they see a full-on rock concert happening in here.
Famous Colombian band from the 1960s.
Yep. On retainer.
This has been a podcast of Christchurch Fox Chapel. Thank you for joining us. We love you. We'll see you all very soon.
Stay classy.
Thanks for stopping by.
Stay classy.